At the time, I was living up in Berkeley and working out of San Francisco. The company I worked for at the time was Morgan Stanley, and they sent me out there with two others for a 3 week program, which was in the second tower, the south tower of the World Trade Center. And I arrived there on Saturday the 8th, spent a couple of days with a friend of mine that lived out there. And finally on Monday, we reported for work, at the World Trade Center. And we started at 7:30 in the morning, which was 4:30 in the morning California time. So we didn't have enough time to really adjust. So we were tired, those Californians, during the first day because we just didn't get enough sleep. And on that Monday, that same day, there was a huge rainstorm. I got soaked because instead of going back after we finished that day, instead of going back to my hotel, I decided to stick around, Lower Manhattan to walk around a bit. And then I got soaked in the rainstorm. That night, I went back to my hotel, which was the Shelburne Murray Hill. And my roommate was out of our LA office, a guy named Mike. So we both, kind of stayed up late watching TV. We saw American Beauty on HBO. And then afterwards, we saw an episode of Band of Brothers, that World War II series. We fell asleep like at 3 o'clock, which was really dumb because we had to be up early the next morning to go to work. So around, I think it was 6:30, 6:45, we jump up and we're like running around like chickens because our bus left the hotel, I think around 7. So we were running around, just enough time to catch the bus, to make it to the building towers. So this is, Tuesday morning, the 11th, and it was a beautiful day. It was nice blue sky. It was nice and cool. I remember there was a bagel cart out in the street. So when we got there, I got myself a poppy seed bagel with cream cheese. But instead of eating it, I just kind of held the bag and we went up to our office, or to the 61st floor where we were having our training sessions. And sure enough, for that first hour where, they're talking to us about products and all. And I was so tired and sleepy that I had a rubber band on my hand and I kept snapping it to stay awake. I was literally dozing off, so I kept snapping the rubber band to stay awake. And around 8:30 or so, we had our first break. So we go and there's fruit and coffee. And so I get a cup of coffee and we start walking around. And then outside our windows, we start seeing papers flying outside. And my first thought was like, who the heck is throwing papers out the windows? And then my next thought was like, well, you can't open these windows. These windows are just sealed. And these are big, big windows. You can just see everything. From our vantage point, we're looking out towards the Statue of Liberty. So Tower 1, the North Tower, is behind us. We can't see them. So as these papers are flying outside the window, after a couple seconds, the papers are on fire. So first it was regular papers, and all of a sudden the paper's on fire. And then we're like, holy crap. So we go walk up to the windows, and we're so high up that we're looking down on the buildings next to us. And we see fiery debris all over the place. And I step back and I say out loud, I think a bomb went off in our building. At which point, a lot of my coworkers kind of looked around like, holy crap, like, let's get out of here. So at that point, we all started to grab our stuff and started to evacuate. And so I grabbed I had my satchel and a jacket with me. And I remember before I started going down, I went to, there was a bunch of phones in one of the corners. So I went to one of the phones to call one of my friends from the San Francisco office to tell him, hey, this is what's going on. But again, it was so early California time that no one was in the office yet. So at this point, everybody's already, going down. So I go into the stairwell and we start, walking down orderly. And everybody was calm. Someone had spilled coffee, and everybody was like, be careful, spilled coffee, making sure nobody slipped. So we're walking down. And then when I get to about the 45th floor, a voice comes up on the intercom in the stairwell. And a man's voice goes, "Everybody be calm. A plane hit the First World Trade Center. The second tower is secure. You can all go back to your offices." At which point the guy behind me was like, "Yeah, I heard a small plane hit the building." And the lady in front of him was like, "That's bullshit. Let's get out of here." And for some reason, I was the dividing point in the stairway. The people in front of me continued downward. The people behind me went back up. And I'm standing there thinking, well, should I stay or should I go? And I remember that the 44th floor, since the elevator is so tall, you have to transfer in certain levels to, get up and down on the elevators. So the 44th floor was one of those transfer levels. So I figured, okay, I'm going to go down one more flight of stairs to the 44th and just kind of wait it out there. So I go down to the 44th floor, and when I enter the 44th floor, there was, the wall was probably about 10 feet to my left, and there were two escalators, one going up and one going down next to me. And then to my right were the elevators. And these elevators, they were the biggest elevators I've ever seen in my life. They were huge. So there were people there walking around. And in front of me was a flat screen TV with the news on. And it had the closed captioning. So sure enough, it says, "Plane hits the First World Trade Center." And I thought to myself, whoa, what a relief. Because I thought it was like a terrorist attack. But, and again, and I'm thinking it was maybe a small plane, like a Piper or a Cessna, or, I think, it was just a single-seater plane where a guy accidentally hit the building. So I thought, poor guy, sucks for him, but it's not as bad as we thought. And I don't know, maybe a few seconds later, boom, a loud explosion just ripped through the back of the building. And the building just jumped. You can feel the building just heave forward. And in that split second, I thought, oh crap, they got me. Because I thought it was a bomb. I didn't know it was another plane. So, this loud boom, I thought it was a bomb. So in that split second, I was like, it's intentional, it's a terrorist attack, and they got me because it just ripped through the back of the building. Well, as I'm turning around, from the impact of the plane, you see things flying across the room. Desks, chairs, just stuff flying across the room. And I think to myself, wow, it looks just like a movie. And by the time I finish spinning around, I can see the people behind me falling. The lights are flashing on and off. You see the walls cracking. And it's just shaking and shaking. I thought to myself, well, that's it. I'm done. In that moment, I accepted that I was going to die. I was just like, okay, I'm going to die. That's it. So the building kept shaking and shaking. And then finally, when it stopped, it shook so hard that I actually expected it to collapse. It was shaking really hard in there. I was waiting for it to come down. But once it stopped shaking, I thought to myself, I got to get out of here. So I turned around, and the escalators that I was standing next to were twisted. The building shook so hard that it twisted the escalators, that is. Somehow I ran down the escalators to the 43rd floor, and then I saw three people dressed in white running towards me and then running off to my right. And some people later on were like, oh, those must have been your guardian angels. But there was a cafeteria on that floor, on the 43rd floor, and these people were the cafeteria workers dressed in white. But nonetheless, I started running after them because it's like they knew where they were going. So I'm running after them. They're praying in Spanish, so I started praying. And we're running down the hallway, and at the end of the hall, we get into another stairwell. And at that point, it's just filled with people running down the stairs. They were just running. And in the stairwell, there's a big placard with the floor number. So the first number I see is 43, and I'm running down, it's 42, and then 41, and 40, and I'm thinking, when the hell am I getting out of here? Because we're just literally running down. By the time we got to around the mid-20s, we were, because then me and the people in the stairwell, we were walking because we were so tired. And around the 25th floor, there was smoke in the stairwell. And I couldn't figure out why there was smoke down here when the plane hit up here. So I reached into my bag to grab a handkerchief, but instead of my handkerchief, I grabbed my camera because it was my first time in New York. So I had a camera with me with like 3 or 4 extra rolls of film. It was like a little Nikon point and shoot camera. So I take the camera out and I just instinctively clicked it, I guess to see if it worked or if it had film. But I took it out and clicked it, and then I took another picture of people coming down the stairwell. So at that point, we're just going down the stairs. The Port Authority, people that worked in the building, were guiding us out. They were like, go this way, go that. And as finally we were getting down to the very bottom, that's when we started seeing the firemen going up the stairwells. Since there was so much, I'm assuming this, but since there was so much debris falling from the towers, they didn't want us running out, right outside. So all 7 World Trade Center buildings were connected underground. There was like subways and shops. So we go downstairs, all the way down to the basement level where the subways and the shops are at, and we walked across and then came out through World Trade Center 5. And as soon as we popped out of World Trade Center 5, one of the guys working there says, don't look up, don't look up. So naturally I turned around and looked up, and that's when I finally saw both towers on fire. And I was like, holy crap, like that what was going on, I didn't see it. So I took a picture of it, turned around, and I ran across the street. And I was running across the street, there was a cameraman to my left, panning across, filming me. And as I got to the other side of the street, I turned around and took some more pictures. And luckily, somehow, one of my coworkers, Tom, was there behind me, probably about 30 feet behind me. I had no idea he was there behind me. And with all the thousands of people around there, it's a miracle that we even met up right there in the front. So at that point, we're in shock. I'm looking up at the towers and I'm thinking, what are we going to do for work tomorrow? Our office is on fire. So we were in shock. We were trying to, I guess, normalize things like that. Some lady in a suit, again from the Port Authority, walks up to us. And she goes, guys, it's not a good idea to be hanging around here. And we're like, yeah, you're right. Let's not hang around. Because at that point, cars were stopped. People were crowding. The car doors were open with the news on. And they were saying, such and such place got hit. This place got hit. And we're like, holy crap. Like it's, I literally told my friend, we're at ground zero of an attack. So we started to walk, we're like, let's get out of here. So we walked up from World Trade Center 5 to Broadway. And then we just started walking up Broadway. And at this point, we're taking more pictures. And then we walked into a store to do some shopping, like a grocery store. We get a couple bags, a couple baskets, and we're like putting groceries in water bottles. And after like 5 minutes, we're like, what the hell are we doing? So we dropped the baskets, just took the water bottles, paid for them, and then walked out and kept going up Broadway. And at this point, we're walking further and further up, taking more pictures. And as we're walking up, the buildings in front of us are starting to block the towers. So we could no longer see the towers. We can just see the smoke billowing out of them. And I'd say maybe about 5 or 6 blocks up, we hear boom. And everybody turns around. And in the distance, you can see a dust cloud rising up to the streets. And we thought it was a bomb because we heard, boom. And in one of the pictures, actually in a couple of the pictures, you see everybody in the street that's turned around. And we're looking down the street. And you see the dust cloud in the distance. And again, we thought it was a bomb. So we started to run. And I don't know how far we ran. We just started running. And at some point, there was a liquor store. I mean, there were shops, and people were like either ducking in or getting out of the way because we're running. And one of the shops is a liquor store, so we ducked into the liquor store. We walk in, get a bottle of Jack Daniels, walk up to the counter, put down, I don't know how much it was, $20-$30. And we just opened up the bottle at that point and just started drinking right out of it. So we walk out of the liquor store drinking our Jack Daniels, and we start walking up Broadway some more. Because our hotel was near Grand Central Station. So we just had to keep walking up. Well, my friend, he had a brother that lived out in New York at the time. And I believe it was in the Chelsea area. I'm not too sure, but instead of walking back to our hotel, we walked to his brother's apartment. And my friend had a cell phone, but there was no reception. I guess, reception was knocked out for a large area of Manhattan. So we weren't able to call anyone. So when we finally got to his brother's apartment, his brother opened up the door. And the first thing he says when he looks at us is, "I thought you guys died." And, we were like, wow, that's something to say. He was like, they thought. So, they gave each other a hug and we walked inside. And then at this point, we started drinking the Jack Daniels out of a glass with ice. And I remember I couldn't sit down. I was walking and my hand was just shaking. Can't really shake too much, but my hand was shaking. And I was ready to jump out the window if I had to. I had so much adrenaline coursing through me. And he had the TV on, so that's when we finally saw what had happened. Because we didn't see the planes hit the building. We were inside, and we didn't see the towers fall because they were blocked off from our view. So that's when we saw on the news footage of the towers going down and the planes hitting. We're like, holy crap, that's what was going on. So we're like, wow, our minds are going 100 miles per hour. We're like, holy crap, all this is going on. At that point, I tried to call my family, and I was able to get a hold of my parents, but since it happened so early California time, they didn't know what was going on. They didn't turn on the TV or anything, so they didn't know what was going on. So I remember telling my dad that I'm in New York and I'm okay. He was just like, okay, you're fine, so they didn't know. So I thought, okay, well, at least they know I'm okay once they find out. So after about an hour or so, we walked back to our hotel. And again, we were, at least an hour later than everybody else in our group was. So as I walk into the hotel, from the bar on the bottom, my roommate from the LA office, Mike, comes running out and gives me a hug. And he says, "I thought you guys died," because we were so late, we didn't arrive with everybody else. So he had gone through my luggage looking for a phone number to call, my family. And I didn't carry any phone numbers with me, but so he didn't get a hold of me, luckily. But from there, I walked up to my room, changed, called another friend of mine at the time that was living in New York, a gal named Veronica, and I went out to meet her. and it's weird because like again, all this is going on, and in my mind, I'm trying to get some semblance of normality. So I go and see her. She lives by Central Park, and we go and we eat, and we walk around and we talk, and like for the whole night, we're just walking and walking. All while in the distance, you see the smoke from the towers having collapsed. When I finally got back to my hotel room later on that night, I was just exhausted. Exhausted from running down the building, from walking all the way up from, lower Manhattan to Midtown Manhattan I walked several miles that day that I just knocked out. And what I tell people is that it wasn't just like 9/11, but the following day, because we didn't know what was going on. They kept saying that there was maybe chemicals in the planes. So the smoke, had chemicals or, we just didn't know what was going on. So we were paranoid, like, is something else going to happen still? There were bomb threats at the Empire State Building. There were armed troops in every corner. We just still didn't feel safe, And then finally, I spent a couple, some time with my friend Tom, but I spent like a large amount of that time on my own, just walking around New York, taking pictures and seeing what's going on. And then finally on Saturday, a few days later, we were able to get a flight from LaGuardia to Atlanta, and then from Atlanta to San Francisco. And due to the increased security, I missed the flight. He had got on it, but I missed it, so I was on a flight behind it. So I didn't see him until we got to Atlanta, and then from there we got to San Francisco. And we arrived there probably around midnight on Saturday. And my friend Tom had a friend that owned a bar in North Beach in San Francisco. So they took us to the bar where they kind of celebrated us. But coming from what we just did, we just weren't in the mood. So we left, we didn't stay too long. But from that point, I was back in California and, away from all that. But, there's more stuff that happened afterwards, but that's the story of me being there.
I felt like your story is so compelling that it should be heard by our group. And, it should be heard by more than our group, of course, but just an amazing story.
Yeah, and I'm lucky that I had a camera with me. So I took probably about 50 photographs, and I have a bunch of, newspapers from that day.
Oh, wow.
Oops. There we go. So this was the next morning, the New York Times, and I have a picture of me holding up. So that's me on the second to the left with my blue cow shirt on. The guy in the middle was my roommate, and the guy in the far right with the hat, that's my friend Tom. And since those are the newspapers we're holding up. And in the back, that's our hotel. But that was the very next morning. We were paranoid, with what happened. We were, worried that something more was going to happen. We didn't feel easy until we left New York. Even when I got back to San Francisco, because I worked in a tall building, there were days when I would just stare out the window. It was crossing the Bay Bridge was something for me at that point. It was like worrisome. So for several years, I tried to avoid tall buildings. Just going to downtown LA sometimes made me feel dizzy. Just like looking at the buildings, it did change, me for a few years, unfortunately.
Now on the anniversaries, are you like more traumatized, or are you more just thankful that you've lived through that?
it's always hard at this time of year. Um, Usually around August, mid-August, I start feeling like this heaviness in the air, this dread. Um, it's not easy. For a few years I did presentations, and then after the 10th anniversary, they just kind of stopped. So I had a few years where I was just kind of on my own, where I would be with friends or by myself. And then, with the 20th, I'm going to be at another event on Friday. But yeah, every year at this point, at midnight, right when it strikes midnight, it's September the 12th. It's like a whole new. It's like 1,000 pounds got lifted off my shoulder. It's the weirdest feeling, but it's like at midnight, boom, right when it's September 12th, I feel so much better, like magically. So it's just a heavy day for me. I went to a handful of memorials over the years. One of the things that, and I'm pretty vocal about this, but no one really mentions survivors much, unfortunately. They mention the dead, which they should. They mentioned the first responders, but hardly anyone ever mentions the survivors. People are still around that lived through it. I'm still here, so I'm thankful for that.
Well, we're glad you're here, and thank you for sharing the story with us.